My answer came in the most unlikely of circumstances in a field I hadn't thought of before. While in Capiz, I became involved in relief efforts after Typhoon Frank had devastated the small island barangay of Olotayan. I met a doctor who had recently attended a seminar by Dr. Lillian Lee regarding an extremely rare and thus far untreatable form of dystonia.
XDP is X-linked dystonia Parkinsonism syndrome. So it used to be called dystonia of Panay. Panay in reference to Panay Island in the Philippines. The whole spectrum is dystonia and Parkinsonism because there are also Parkinson-like syndromes. So these are involuntary, repetitive, small tremor movements. To be able to flex my hand, so my flexor muscles would need to contract, but at the same time, my extensor muscles of the hand would need to relax so that my hand can flex. This is coordinated in the brain. Patients with XDP would get repetitive, twisting, uncontrolled contractions of opposing muscle groups. That's why the local name is also, one of the local names is lubag. If you translate it in English, it means twisting, muscle twisting, lubag.
XDP is passed down genetically. This is how it works. In healthy parents, the man would have an X and a Y chromosome. The female would have two X chromosomes. If they were to have a son, an X chromosome comes from the mother and the Y comes from the father. If they were to have a daughter, an X would come from the mother and the other from the father. If the female is a carrier of XDP, she is unaffected because the good X chromosome balances out the defect in the other. It is still possible for her to have a healthy son or daughter if the unaffected X chromosome is passed on. However, if the affected gene is passed on, their daughter would become a carrier and their son would have a physical manifestation of the disease, usually appearing sometime in his late 30s or early 40s. Because the onset of XDP comes later in life, it is common for an affected man to have a child before they've begun showing symptoms, leaving his son unaffected but his daughter as a carrier. There are a few cases where an affected male and female had a daughter who received the defective gene from both parents and had the physical manifestation of the disease.
How specific is it to Panay? I think the 500 or so reported cases worldwide, all of them, I think, can be traced to the Philippines and to Panay Island in particular. George Viterbo, I think he was one of the first to observe this dystonia among his patients here in Panay. If I could just show you some of the drawings of George Viterbo, of people that seems to be in a transforming motion or mood. I started thinking that this disease occurring in this population for 50 generations, so that's what, 1,000 years, could easily have contributed to the Aswang Phenomenon. I mean, people visiting these islands, foreigners, Spaniards, Americans, couldn't even also themselves explain, this transforming person, when in fact the person is not really transforming, but is afflicted with a certain disease that they just don't know of.
This particular patient came back to Capiz to live with his family after being independent in Manila for several years. Because of this disease, he lost his job, his girlfriend, and his nieces and nephews, whom he used to play and joke with, are now scared of him. Before being afflicted, he would spend much of his spare time with friends playing basketball, and now finds it frustrating that his life is confined behind closed doors. I learned the only time his muscles relax is when he is sleeping. It is also the only time he can escape from his burden. As he explained, when he dreams, he is unaffected. I later learned that there were many cases where families were shunned because this disease is misunderstood. Even one of my companions on the visit, a resident of Capiz, was scared while sitting near the patient. I couldn't help but be reminded of an Aswang in the stage play Luna, an Aswang Romance. It is uncanny how similar the depiction is, yet it comes from someone who has never seen an XDP patient. I again saw this disturbing interpretation of the Aswang, this time from the children of Capiz, which was very different from the Aswang being imitated in Manila.
Even patients themselves who are affected by XDP become ashamed of it, of the disease, that they have the disease, or that because they don't want to be a burden to their families. So there are cases where they have resorted to just killing themselves because of the stigma, because of the burden, because of the lack of social support, perhaps.
Exploring the medical side of the myth brought me to a paper written by Michael Tan, in which he stated the misunderstanding of psychological disorders could also be a contributing factor to people being labeled as Aswangs.
She looked like old lady, ordinary person. Then when she become Aswang, he doesn't know what she's doing. You can talk with her.
So what does this mean for the Philippines of today? Throughout my research, it would appear that in recent times, Filipinos are starting to take ownership of the Aswang, stripping away outside influences and trying to understand the folklore as a whole, and give depth and understanding to its representations, as opposed to using it as an instrument of fear.
Why is it that the Aswang is ostracized? But at the same time, while she is ostracized, there is somehow with society not only a kind of fear, but a certain if I use the word perverted sense of awe and amazement for this kind of creature, because while she is alive, she is very, very powerful, and she is able to understand the inner workings of the ordinary human mind. The Aswang is actually all the evil, bad things that a town or a society would want to deny, and therefore are hiding inside their closet. And because of this, because of all this, the dark side of this town is being hidden and being denied. It has to come out. It has to be personified into something. And that is the explanation why the Aswang has begun to exist. Because they need a creature or someone that they could purge, that they could blame for the negative things that are happening in the town. And so that once they're able to purge it, the town or the community feels a sense of cleansing. Most of the time, the character of the Aswang, which is the woman, feels a very, very strong passion, usually for a man. And even for that, it's not just because of a man, but also because she is trying to rebel against the strictures of what a woman should be in the town. And because of this strong passion, the pain is so great if it is manifested, especially because of a broken-heartedness, because the man doesn't want this woman, because either she's not following the strictures of society, she's not following the religious codes and the morality of it all. And the pain is so strong that it actually literally rends her apart. When she does that, and half of her flies off, she begins to understand. She can see from a different level of consciousness, and yet half of her is still on the ground. And when she comes back and to reconcile, she cannot see that anymore. She's on that same level of consciousness of half of her body. That's the eternal conflict of the Aswang.
Before the Aswang myth would be taken once again by the people of the Philippines, there would be one more dark blemish in the long history of it being used as a tool of propaganda to inflict fear on the opposition of the controlling powers.
The Philippine culture is that every time that anybody had anything against the government, your only recourse was to become a bandit and go up to the mountain, go to the forest, and become an outlaw. We're still into Robin Hood.
In the 1950s, during the Magsaysay era, when the Hukbalahap was being dismantled by Magsaysay with the help of Colonel Lansdale, and one of the strategies or tactics that they were doing was to spread an Aswang scare.
They were trying to get them to get out of the jungle and come down to refugee centers so that the guerrillas would not be able to move around, and the people wouldn't leave. So what the guy did is they finally grabbed one hold of a guerrilla. Maybe they didn't. They just got hold of some poor villagers, stuck 2 holes in their jugulars, hung them upside down, bled them to death, and then just put their bodies everywhere and started the rumor that there was this Aswang. And so they were driven further back, and they broke their backs through Sai War, through Aswang War.
The Aswang as a form of social control is different from the Aswang as a supernatural being.
At one point in the dictatorship of Marcos, we called them Aswangs. I mean, there was this, equating them with the Aswangs. There was a postcard that had Mark, Ferdinand, and Imelda had this at the back, wings of an Aswang and all that, I mean, we use it as symbolisms of, the way we understand evil.
I heard nasa mga tabloids. I don't know if yung iba, sabi nila, may aswang dito sa Maynila. Galing sa probinsya na ganyan, nakakulong, ganyan. So, pero hindi ko naman alam kung, I did not really follow the story because it's for Filipinos, like even for me who already grew up in a very modern, like Manila, you're still every November 1, every All Saints Day, every time Halloween comes, that's the first thing that you get into your mind, all these creatures that come out. And then on election day, I realized every time there's an election in urban poor communities, that thing would come out.
Whether intentionally or not, the Aswang has been used to strike fear in the heart of Filipinos, propagating lies about anything that threatens control. The constant evolution is difficult to keep up with, yet I see a pattern beginning to emerge, bringing Filipinos back to their roots and solidifying part of their identity as a people. In recent years, it would appear the Aswang has taken on a meaning closer to the original story of Aswang and Agurang. The monster is merely a symbol, and the word has once again begun to represent something that is inflicting a perceived harm on the people, as seen in these protest photos against the Philippine administration. There seems to be a rational explanation for all aspects of the Aswang folklore. I started out with 5 questions. Why are there so many different types of Aswang? It seems clear that society has evolved this creature as a form of social control. Whether it is to strip power from the babaylan, desexualize women, overthrow a rebellion, or have your children obey their curfew. Why are they predominantly women? Again, the powerful females in early Filipino society were viewed as a threat to the Spanish, and the local version of evil was used to take away their strength. Where did the word come from? The story of Aswang and Gugurang and the Panay version show Aswang as an evil spirit or early deity in pre-Spanish Philippines. How does the Manananggal fit into this? the evolution of the Penanggal from Malaysia, and the incorporation of regionalized fears and perceptions of evil. The Spanish friars' inclusion of Western and Christian values and beliefs, including the concepts of demons, possession, and the devil, turned this particular creature into something truly horrifying. Most important to me was, why is the Visayan province of Capiz suspected as their home? X-linked dystonia Parkinsonism, a horribly misunderstood disease, hidden by those affected and misunderstood by their communities. When I began this journey, I never suspected one simple word was so integral in the control, development, and progress of the nation. For better or worse, Aswang is part of Filipino society, and understanding where the word came from is the first step in dispelling its power and the fear it creates. I hope this film contributes to this, and creates an understanding and dialogue to ensure that a word representing evil can evolve into an educational tool and a thread in the historical timeline of the Philippines.
Now there's a lot more poverty, there's a lot more squalor, and there's a lot more helplessness, even if you're in community. So I think, again, anything you cannot identify that keeps you powerless becomes the monster. So they have to create the monsters in order to be able to strike at it.
Aswang is the umbrella representation of everything that is vile, disgusting, and evil in Philippine society.
That's why it becomes very horrifying, because society denies its existence, and so it has to find a way to come out.
All great horror stories are based on a very strong poetic truth about ourselves.
Pagkatahabang buhay mo rin itong madarama. Ganito rin ang ginawa ko sa ibinunga ng ating pagsasama. Ako ang unang aswang ng bayan ito. Ako ang salamin ng kanilang kabulukan. Mga pagnanasang hindi maaaring bigkasin. Mga ugaling nakaririmarin. Ako ang salamin na ayaw nilang harapin. Subalit mas makapangyarihan ang tawag ng katotohanan. Nagsimula sa isang pagnanasang makamtan ng langit. Ngayon isang buhay na malungkot man ay malalim naman ang pagkunawa. Malungkot dahil nakikita ko ang dilim na sila mismo ang nagdulot. Marami ang magiging tulad ko. Nasawi, itinapon sa gubad ng malihim. At magiging tulad nila ako. Ikaw yun, kung nanais ko.
Walang isang lumikot na biglang sa binata.